It's no secret that Steve Jobs pushed computer technology into the future. You don't have to be a fan of his abrasive management style or narcissistic personality to acknowledge that. It wouldn't be a surprise to most that he was privy to futuristic ideas far in advance of their worldwide release. Everyone knows that. What might surprise some, however, was that near the end of his life, he personally supervised a clandestine design group working on a next-generation metaphysical communications project. It was so secret, as a matter of fact, that initially he refused to even inform his engineers and designers of what the purpose was. Eventually, he had no choice but to let them in on his master plan. Fumbling around in the dark certainly wasn't going to be productive. The secret project was intended to link the living with the dead through a series of incredible technological and scientific breakthroughs. To say it had great personal meaning to him was an understatement. He fooled the world for many years into believing he might actually beat his cancer, as well as being in denial himself. But deep down he knew his time was very limited. For someone so self-involved for most of his life, it took the ominous, lingering shadow of death to make him fully value his life and family. He feared losing eternal contact with them. And if there was one thing Steve Jobs enjoyed, it was pushing through impossible boundaries and making the impossible possible. Connecting the dead with the living would be his greatest and final amazing achievement. The technology was designed to exploit a cellular bandwidth that seemed neither useful nor valuable to any competitors or governments. As a believer in unconventional ideas, Steve started exploring the idea that the dead just moved on to another plane of existence, a plane that he believed could be reached via that unused bandwidth. He has his team working on out-of-the-box ideas of how to connect the living with those unused frequencies. Of course, it was a huge financial gamble, and came across as the misguided efforts of a foolish dreamer with too much money and ambition. He fully accepted there was some truth to that, but it wasn't the first time he was labeled a snake oil salesman and con man by his detractors. He always enjoyed watching them eat crow. Even if the mental link was possible with the living and the technology, there was no verifiable data that suggested the dead could also connect to it too, or that the two separated realms could be fused together via current electronics. The thing is, Steve wasn't the sort of person you said no to. His specially assembled team was sworn to absolute secrecy. They worked round the clock for over a year to prepare the amazing technology for its sole beta tester, himself. His last living words were well documented in the media. Wow, oh wow. It was all over the news, but without the proper context of realizing he was already wired up to the advanced prototype and seeing the other side for the first time, it seemed like a spiritual utterance of an overwhelmed man about to pass away. No one else could see what he saw on his deathbed, but his experimental development team and the trusted management partners believed he had successfully paired with it. If ever there was a massive technological advancement that was going to be difficult to keep under wraps, that was going to be it. For his wishes, he was buried with his advanced iPhone prototype and a power cell capable of running the device for about 5 years. His family knew that he requested for special equipment to be buried with his body, but they hadn't been privy to his last technology campaign. He didn't want them to be disappointed if it failed. Instead, his home was secretly wired with corresponding equipment to receive signals from the so-called worthless bandwidth. The associated hardware to power this experimental technology came with scalable chipsets for future advancement. It was actually a couple of weeks afterward when calls from Steve's phone started showing up on the caller IDs of his inner circle. His family members assumed it was a hacker's sick joke and immediately blocked the number. This posed a significant technological roadblock. When the calls were received by his secret development team members, they didn't know what to do. Unlike his family, they knew exactly who was calling, but none of them were prepared to answer a pioneering call of that magnitude. In the conference room, Tim Cook patched the call through to the intercom system. He wanted the world's first call from the other side to be well documented. "Hello, this is Tim. Damn it, Tim, take me off the speaker system. I want this to be between the two of us only." Tim hit the speaker release button to route the call back to his phone. Just hearing Steve's disembodied voice again was enough to make everyone's jaw drop. No one ever expected to hear his live voice again. It was beyond surreal. Everyone present had attended the funeral. Even the team tasked with his final paranormal project never expected for it to actually work. All of a sudden they were witnessing an unlikely history in the making. Of course, technological advances had been made in that same room numerous times, but this was epic and unparalleled. Tim's appearance was as pale as a ghost, yet he had a silly grin on his face. All eyes of the staff studied his friendly features for a hint or clue about the one-sided conversation. He was obviously getting a posthumous earful from their former mercurial taskmaster. It was almost like old times. Tim hung up and studied the screen of his iPhone, as if digesting the nuances of such a monumental event. The room pulsed with the combined excitement of 23 people anxious to know what the dead man said. His unnatural pause increased the tension by a factor of 5. He opened his mouth dramatically to speak several times, but failed to say anything. It was torture to everyone present, and only grew worse when he stood up and then abruptly left without explanation. In life, some members of the public saw Steve Jobs with a messianic zeal that rivaled religious leaders. Others reviled him for numerous incendiary reasons, either justified or perceived. But few ignored him. They couldn't. Like Edison, Tesla, and Westinghouse, he helped to shape the modern world. Now he was the first person in history to officially report back from the grave. This was going to be bigger than, well, you know. The chief design tech and head of software operations jumped up and chased him down the hallway. They weren't about to let him off the hook over the most unusual and occult communication event in history. Tim walked very fast, as he always does, but his two pursuers rapidly caught up with him. "Come on, Tim. Tell us. My God, you just spoke to a dead man. What did Steve say to you? I need to know." "Both of us do." Tim slowed a minute as if he was going to tell them, but went back to his urgent pace. "You two get back to the conference room and swear everyone to absolute secrecy before someone blabs it on Twitter or Facebook. The world isn't ready for this crazy development, and I'm not sure any of us are either. Right now, I have an urgent matter I must attend to. If you think Steve was impatient before, you should hear him now." What is it? Tell us." Tim relented. He waited for weeks to test the equipment, and when he did, there was some glitch with the communications interface. Despite the overall success of the project, he's not completely satisfied. In the meantime, while I break the news to his unsuspecting widow, you two need to contain this Titanic-sized revelation until we can figure out how to disseminate it to the world. Go." Both of them stopped their forward process immediately and turned around. Tim wasn't a demanding tyrant like their former boss had been, but on the rare occasion when he barked an order, it had better be obeyed to the letter. He was dead serious about the need for silence. They raced back to the conference room before any more of the staff trickled out and leaked the scoop of the century. "Hello there. It's so, Tim. How are you and the family holding up? You know that I never want to bother you about the daily operations that go on around here, but something has come up. It's pretty significant. I need to let you know about it. But first, have you received any unusual phone calls in the past couple days?" Steve's wife admitted a prankster had called several times using his private number, but she blocked it. Tim didn't know how to explain the incredible truth to her. He took over most daily operations for that final 18 months as Steve tinkered with his paranormal hobby. He knew Steve never told her about the clandestine communication project, so there was no easy or stress-free way to explain who the identity of the caller was. "Where are you? At home. I don't want you driving or doing anything dangerous for the next little bit, okay? I know this will come as a horrific shock to you. It's best you are sitting down. Are you sitting down?" She replied that she was. "I need you to unblock that number. The one calling using Steve's old number, okay? I wouldn't ask if it wasn't imperative. There's someone very anxious to talk to you, and I'm absolutely certain you'll want to take the call." She demanded to know who it was, but Tim waffled and made excuses. Only the man himself could explain the truth. Nothing less than the genuine article would be believed. Maybe not even then. It was still unbelievable to think about. They had bridged the gap of death. "Tim, I'm going to be very angry if I unblock that number and it's some reporter or something. I don't want to give an interview or open our home to nosy reporters. We value our privacy. You know that." Yes, of course. Please unblock Steve's number. You won't regret it. I promise." No sooner than she had unblocked the number, she received her first ever posthumous phone call. "Hello, who is this?" she demanded. Her patience was pretty thin, and her level of blind trust in Steve's successor was equally sparse. She didn't know who would be on the line, but there was one person she knew it couldn't be. Yet it was. She didn't speak for nearly a full minute. What she heard didn't compute. A voice on the other end sounded just like Steve. As a matter of fact, not only did it sound just like her recently departed husband, but also what was said and how it was vocalized. The caller's tone and inflection was a dead ringer for him in every way. The mysterious caller demanded to know if she and the kids were all right, but it was impossible to focus on the question. It was just too startling to hear him. "Who is this?" she repeated breathlessly. Her heart pounded. She assumed it was some clever AI trick employed to digitize his voice patterns before he died. "You know who it is. It's me, Steve. Your real question is how. I realize it seems impossible, but before I passed away, I worked with a very talented group of engineers and research scientists based in the UK on an incredible technological breakthrough. They recently discovered that." She interrupted angrily. "What sort of horrible fraud is this? You aren't my husband. We both know he died after a long, protracted illness a few weeks ago. Maybe there exists a technology market to simulate the vocal patterns of the deceased in some situations, but I find this in incredibly bad taste." Steve would have hated it too. They know how much of a control freak he was. He would have never signed off on a simulator to guess his responses, and neither will I now. She was about to hang up when he responded with the only thing that would make her think. He blurted out something that only the two of them knew. It was a personal secret she knew he would never share with anyone else, yet the familiar voice on the line knew it. She started trembling. He continued speaking of their past with undeniable authority. He shared personal details about their children and intimate secrets that only her husband would know. She started crying. "How can it be?" She wept. "It can't be. I always thought death was the end. I certainly hoped I was wrong, but I didn't put much stock in the idea of an afterlife. You know better than anyone else I had my struggles with organized religion. The thing is, I can see you. I'm not some ghost floating overhead. This is a different dimension. It has no natural portal between there and here. I'm a non-corporeal entity now. Someday you and the kids will join me here in this existence. Until then, I've found a way to bridge the great divide.